real speakers, real coaches, real investors, real companies. No matter your destiny, all roads lead to Real Leaders Unite.
Well, they definitely sent her the long bio, so my apologies about that. How was the panel this morning? Good? Yeah, it seemed good. I've seen Damon before, and it's really fun, and of course, I'm a fan of Shark Tank. I was asked to come and speak today to really give a message around practicality. So just by raising our hands, we're going to get interactive, and we're also going to use our phone. So let me ask you a first question here, just by show of hands. How many of you experience some form of complexity at work? Yeah, okay. I'm always surprised if somebody doesn't raise their hand. What I want to be able to do is show you a few things. I want to show you how complexity happens. Then I want to talk about how people are using simplicity as a strategic advantage. And then I want you to leave with some really practical tips. And we're going to do an interactive exercise so you can walk away with things to do right away. You know, the power around simplicity is more than just saving money. The big thing for everyone here is it's about saving time. And the reason that's important isn't because you want to be able to do more, it's that you want to be able to do valuable. And so much of us don't have enough time to think. And we give away our time too freely. So we're going to put boundaries around that today because the impact is incredible. So think about this. If a person works 2,100 hours a year, you probably work much more than that. That's 40 hours a week. If they got back just 10% of their time, 10%, and I'm sure you do more than 10% of wasted things, right, during the year, it's 210 hours, right? That's 5 weeks of time. It's more than a month. So the impact that has collectively is millions and millions of hours over time. So let's dive in and let's start talking about simplification. Now let me ask you another question here. How many people here feel that their jobs have gotten more complex over the last 5 years? More complex, okay. Now what's interesting about that is because for many people here, you're leaders, and you're probably in the third stage of your career, so you experience more complexity. Do you know what the 3 stages of a career are? I'm going to tell you what they are, okay? The 3 stages of a career, you're in the third stage, which is the most important. So let me share what they are, and then you can see if you relate to them, okay? Stage number 1 is I can't wait until I'm important enough to be included in meetings. Do you remember that stage? Yeah. I can't believe I ever had that stage. The second is I feel so important now being included in these meetings. Remember that? That's why when you have employees that say they don't want to be in meetings, but then they have FOMO when they're not asked, that's that stage. This is your stage. I'll do anything legal and even illegal things to avoid meetings. You want to be able to get out of meetings. You want to spend your time on things that matter. So let's dive in and let's do that. Grab your phone for me if you can. And what I'm going to do is have you open up a website that's really cool. If you haven't used this before, it's great with your teams, menti.com. So go there for me right now, menti.com. And when you get there, I'll read out this code for you to enter. It's 9308 3608. So once again, menti.com and the code 9308 3608. Someone raise their hand if you were able to get in. Okay, we're getting there. I know it's early and you're not caffeinated yet. It's okay. All right, I'm going to keep moving on, and this code will be at the top of your screen. So if you get knocked out, you can get back in. Here's the first question, and you can click next slide on your phone if it doesn't advance to this. How often, specifically, are you and your team experiencing complexity in your daily work? Now, your options are never, rarely, often, very often. Dear God, please make it stop. Okay.
Can you just define complexity?
Sure can. Yep. Complexity to me is unnecessary work, time sucks, and things that are not adding value. Right? Think of it more as complicated, unnecessarily complicated and complex. Okay? So we've got, let's see the results here so far. We have no liars that said never, so that's good. We have 2 rarely. That's very good. 3 rarely. See me later with your resumes. That's amazing. Often and very often. Anyone surprised by this? No? You shouldn't be surprised, because whether this is your real or perceived, or whether this is your team's real or perceived, this is what the data shows. So let me show you what I mean. Deloitte's done several studies on this, and they asked people up to VP level to describe their work. And almost 75% of them, and this was over 5,000 people that they surveyed, defined their work as complex or very complex and said it was only getting worse. Frankly, when I see these numbers, my reaction is that it doesn't really matter. If you want to know the truth, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter until really the C-suite feels it and wants to change it, because this has been happening for a while. But here's the good news, is that now it's really starting to impact leaders like you, and things are being done about it. SAP did a future of work study, and for the first time, they asked CEOs what their #1 strategic issue was, and 70% of them said complexity. So it was the first time that the call was coming from inside the house, right? CEOs were saying, usually it's pricing, it's competitiveness, it's the war on talent, it can be wars, it can be all kinds of things. This was the first time it was a self-inflicted wound. And so what's interesting about that is, for the first time, the C-suite is seeing that complexity is not just a financial issue. It is. But really what it is, it's the enemy of meaningful work. And what that means is, if you're operating with complexity, you can't move fast enough. You are spending too much time on unnecessary work versus necessary. And if you don't believe me, complexity being a strategic advantage is a key strategic pillar in a lot of organizations today. They basically swapped out innovation as a strategic pillar for simplicity, because they realized that the competition that's catching them off guard are the ones they didn't expect, the ones that were focused on simplicity. Let me show you what I mean. So this slide, if you look here, this is just an example of multi-billion-dollar companies that are less than 20 years old. Netflix is an exception, that have completely disrupted industries, right? Just because of simplicity and focus. So think about this. Uber. How many people have taken an Uber in the last month, by the way? Right. Uber makes it simple to get a car. Airbnb makes it easy to get a place to stay, right? Kickstarter makes it simple for small companies like me to be able to use money and get things to market faster than other people. You've got WhatsApp. It's free to talk on the phone. It's Dropbox, right? Easy to share files. I like to say Match.com, simple to date people that you shouldn't. Right? Sometimes you need the friction. You know what I mean? So anyway, billion-dollar companies that are just completely disrupting things because they're focused and they can move faster than the people that are complex. That's the idea. So the question for you isn't should you simplify. Here's the question. Why do you choose complexity every day? And this is the part where I really want to provoke you a little bit. Why do you choose complexity without even realizing it every single day? I want to do 2 exercises with you to prove what I mean, okay? So the first exercise, let me think which one I want to do first. Okay, the first exercise you can do actually sitting at your chair, okay? So if you have something in your hands, put it down. And I'm going to have you do a simple exercise. You can also do this with your teams. I want you to, on the count of 3, pat your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Pat your head. Good. Rub your stomach. And click your heels. Okay. You're concentrating a lot, which is good. All right, let's stop. I can't see everybody. How many people were able to do all 3 at once? Okay, good. But I didn't tell you to do all 3 at once. I just said, pat your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. And everybody immediately started to get very serious and concentrate, because you don't want to look stupid in front of other people, and you wanted to do it very well, okay? And you did all 3 things at once. This is kind of an analogy for what happens at work, because we're wired often to create complexity that's unnecessary. So we like to multitask, and that's fine. I think you should multitask, but the more strategic, the work that you're doing, the more diminishing returns you're going to get because you can't focus. Well, that's my point, which is how do we do one at a time versus always trying to do all of them diminishing, to your point. So that's one thing. The other one is we always like, or maybe your employees do, to elevate everything to the same level of urgency. And this is a real issue at a lot of companies, right? Everything has to be urgent. Every email, every meeting, every response, every decision. Yes, some do, but not all do. And this is especially true with people that are younger that work for you because they haven't really figured out, right, the ways of working. So how can we teach them not to embrace false urgency? So a lot of complexity, the bad news is that it can be self-imposed. But the good news is a lot of it is in our sphere of control, and that's the thing you really want to focus on is what is the sphere of control that your teams can start to decomplexify at work. Now let me do one more example around complexity, because there's another thing that happens. So this exercise is we're gonna remember a number, and you're gonna repeat it back to me. Okay, it's a very simple exercise, and it'll take us about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna put the number up on the screen, and I'll leave it there, and then I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand if you can repeat it back to me, okay? Here we go. See if you can catalog this. Who's got it? Got it here? What do you got? 315-642-702-7984. Close, but not. Almost. Did you have it? You did. How did you get it? He wrote it down. Did anyone else write it down? Now this is interesting. You hear what he said, cheater. Did anybody take a picture? This is what's so interesting is everybody should have been able to get it. I didn't say memorize it. I said, I want you to be able to repeat it back to me. And what happens is no one said you couldn't take a picture. No one said you couldn't write it down. And we don't spend enough time questioning the way that we work or giving people the ability to take away the fear so they can question the way they work. You know why? Because they think they're cheating. A lot of complexity is driven by fear. And what's interesting about this is our job as leaders is not just to reduce the friction, right, getting rid of stuff, but to reduce the fear. Because a lot of people have hacks and ways to improve systems, but they're afraid to tell you because they think they're cheating. Doing less is seen as bad. And this is an example right here. This is actually a winning team at Novartis. I sit on a board at Novartis, which is a pharmaceutical company in Basel. And what's interesting about this group, this was one of their big offsites, and Voss, who's the CEO, and all of his, their CIO and CTO, we did this work hackathon. And over 3 days, we invited people from all across the company to tackle one simple problem that the marketing group wasn't able to solve. They had over 1,000 solutions in just a few days. This is the winning team, and they got a week off of work. Pretty good. What was interesting was there are lots of ways to hack work, but one, we never ask people, and two, they're too afraid to share them with you. They think they're cheating. So how can we actually change that mindset? So I want to talk to you quickly about the complexity trap, and then I'm going to tell you some stories of how people have broken out of it. So see if this is true for you, okay? So the complexity trap is what happens if you don't simplify. The first thing is you lose focus. Because a lot of people, and I'm going to ask you if this happens to you, get bonused, get a raise, get a promotion based on doing more, not doing valuable. And what I mean by that is you manage more people, a bigger budget, more geographies, more products and services, more. Very rarely are people rewarded for less. That's changing, by the way. Sanofi, which is another pharmaceutical company, is actually bonusing people for simplifying and getting rid of things. So until we actually change our ability of how we tell people what work really is, we say we want valuable work, but we actually give them more, they're not going to have focus. That's the first part of the trap. The second part, which I think is so interesting, is this. You have less agility. And let me just say something about agility really quickly, which is, especially in these last few years with COVID, if one more person tells you to pivot, you're allowed to slap them, right? Everyone is pivoting so hard right now. But that's not the point. I want my team to be able to pivot and be agile. But the problem is we've kind of, through COVID, made that a metaphor for being able to react to change, right? Being ready for the thing that's going to happen to us. I don't want people to be able to wait for change. I want them to create it and put it on others. So the reason I'm telling you that is, if you're operating with complexity, you can't move. And the problem is it's a defensive stance. Complexity is defense. Simplicity is offense, and lets you drive the change, not react to it. Okay, so it's really important. The third thing is an ability to be able to think. So how many people here wish they had more time to think during the day? So much time is wasted when it could be put towards thinking about solving problems. So one of the things that's a problem is, are we valuing within our companies doing or thinking? And thinking, I believe, in a lot of companies is a daring act. It's a really daring act. We say we value it, but if you think about it, when you used to go to somebody's office, right, and you'd say, you want to knock on someone's door and ask them a question, and if they were kind of staring out the window, and you'd say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and that person might react and go, oh, it's okay, I'm just thinking. What would your reaction be to that? Get back to work, right? I wish I had time to just sit around and think. We want to think, but then when people are doing it, we see them as not really working. So how do we actually give people time to think and think about when we think best? So let me get meta with you for a minute, because the reason thinking is important is because simplicity actually is the front end of innovation, and you don't realize it. Innovation is not about coming up with more ideas. Innovation starts by creating the space to think in the first place. And the reason so many people aren't able to give you innovation, they're not able to come up with better ideas, is because they don't have time to think. So when they come to brainstorms and they say, you say, who's got an idea? They haven't even thought about it. So you're not going to get anything different. So let's get meta and let's go back to your phones for a minute. And I want you to tell me, this is just for you, okay? I want you to tell me, when and where do you do your very best thinking? Very best thinking. Let's see. In general, when do you do your best thinking? In the car, alone, okay. Running, great. Through morning. Mine's in the morning too. It's when I'm having coffee alone. Nature. Bathroom, yep. Shower. I always say this, it's so funny, but shower never would come up before COVID, and now it's always one of the top ones. Everyone is showering for some reason. Like, it's a very big showering time for everybody. Like, very clean world right now, I don't know. Okay. So take a look at this. I'm not surprised by this. Are you all surprised? No. Okay, so take a look at this and let's talk about what we see here. All right, so what are the common themes around when we do our best thinking?
We're not at work.
Relaxed. Outside the office.
No devices.
No devices. It's often moving our bodies. So what did you say? I'm sorry? No interruptions. Focused. So what's interesting is a few things. First of all, this is, let me say, congratulations, you're like everyone else. And that's a good thing, right? We all do our thinking in different ways. So that's important as a leader to recognize this, because how I do my best thinking is alone in the morning with a cup of coffee. That's my thing. I have some designers that work with me that need like throbbing trance music to be able to think. I cannot be around them when they do that. But the important thing is to carve out time for it, because again, if you don't create the space to think, the innovation won't happen. The big thing to take away from this too is usually it's when it's quiet and when we're alone. That can be moving or not. And the reason this is important is because no one ever says they do their best thinking at work, ever. I have never, ever had even one of the top 10 things be at work, in the office, during, on a Teams call. Nobody says that. But what they do say is it's when I get away from work, when it's quiet, when my brain can be quiet. Now, this is important for you all as leaders because we do our best, let me say it a different way. We get our best thinking. We get our best ideas typically when we're alone. but we build our best ideas when we're together. And the problem is we only just come up with ideas when we're together. Who's got an idea? Let's have a brainstorm. But we haven't really primed everybody and given them time to think about what we're brainstorming in the first place. So we get our best ideas when we're alone, but we build them when we're together. Are you giving people time to come up with the ideas? Otherwise, you're going to get the same old usual suspects again and again. Okay, so let me ask another question that builds on this. So if we're not, and our teams aren't doing our best thinking at work, what's taking up our time? What's typically taking up you or your team's time at work? Just off the top of your head. What do we typically spend our day doing? Zooms, listening, billable work, very good, okay. Meetings, phone calls, video calls, billable work, listening, Zooms, communication, video calls and emails, organizing, complexity, well done. Reading materials, okay. Anyone surprised by this? Yeah? Who said they were surprised? Why are you surprised by this?
A lot of that's not billable work, or it's vaguely. Like revenue generating.
Reacting to urgency. Anyone else have a reaction to this? What you see? Usually what this is people spend their time in the work of work. The stuff that gets to work, right? And the reason I'm saying that is a lot of it is doing things that we think are related to tasks, but they're not, right? We're meeting. Most meetings are horrible, right? We're getting together and collaborating. You're really just in a meeting. So if we're spending our time in the work of work, that's not going to go away, by the way. I mean, of course you're going to have meetings, and not all emails are bad. But how can we make them better, since that's where we spend the majority of our time? In fact, this data, which is what everyone says, points to the data in the research. So this is another one from Bain, and what was interesting from this is they asked people, what do they spend their day doing? And this was the breakout, 45% in meetings, which I thought would be higher, by the way. 23% in email, 18% in unproductive work, right? Defined as a colleague just complaining and moaning usually to them, or collaborating, I should say. And then 14% was meaningful work. Now, what if you could just pivot 10% of that? Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing? By the way, this was only between the time of 9 and 5. So I bet it would go up exponentially, right, if you added in more hours. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about simplicity and who's doing it. And then I want to give you some tactics that you can start to try, and we're actually going to play a little game with it. So one thing to think about if you want to simplify is I want you to think about it like a continuum. And the reason that's important is because it depends on how much you want to lean into it. I mean, one thing to think about, by the way, is that simplicity is free. That's what people don't realize. It doesn't typically cost you anything to simplify. Yes, if you're redoing a whole IT system, but I'm saying within your sphere of control, if you give people permission to get rid of, typically it doesn't cost you a dime. So why aren't we doing it? If you want to be informal, there's small ways you can do it, like Dell. You know, they have a huge sense of false urgency with their young staff, to the point of where it was crippling people. They were burning out. They were having to respond to emails all throughout the night because they worked so much with India and the time difference. Managers there started, I don't think I put it on here, did I? Yes, I did. Managers started using an email signature, and I'll show you this, that told people to stop having false urgency, because young people were perceiving that everything had to be done right now. So managers at Dell said, you know what, let's get rid of the complexity, let's stop drowning the inboxes, and let's add this to email signatures. It was called a human notice. And here's what it says. We work at a digitally enabled, relentless pace, etc. I'm sending you this email at a time that works for me. I only expect you to respond when convenient for you. Now, of course, if you're sending something that's urgent, do not put this on there, right? It's not a black and white thing. But the idea was, how can we stop people from being so urgent? The other thing that's really interesting when you go back and look at this is there's small things people do. Like, let's take Google. Google has something called a cut the crap committee. And what's interesting about this is something that a bunch of rogue VPs did. And basically what they said was, we're drowning in too much crap. And people don't realize the way that they work. So they identified within their teams 2 people each month that were in charge of cutting the crap. And their job was to be like anthropologists. And they would study their employees and their team members in the wild every day. And they would observe how they worked. And at the end of the month, they had to, it was mandated, report back what the crap was that they were going to get rid of. And what was cool about it was a formalized committee, and it was mandated that they do it. It was free, and it took away the fear of reporting back on waste. You go all the way up, by the way, to the other part of this continuum, and you've got people like Pfizer that have 40 simplicity champions around the world. I know that because we personally train them. And Novartis, right, with their global work hackathons, and they have saved millions of dollars. So let me show you an example, actually, that's on a smaller level of what you can do with simplicity. Now, this is Vancity Credit Union. They are from Vancouver, Canada, and they're amazing. Are you Canadian? Yes. I love them. I met the head of Vancouver City's simplicity effort at a financial conference, at an investing conference. And she was talking to me about simplicity, and I asked her what her title was. And she said she's the Chief Simplicity Officer. And I said, I didn't know that was a title. How did you get that? And she said, I just declared that I was the Chief Simplicity Officer, which I thought was kind of cool. So she said, I basically hired 2 people. I trained them in Agile, and we created a half-day sprint that anybody in the bank, anyone, any VP, could come and put any policy and procedure through. They just had to commit to killing something when we were done, free. In 1 year, because the goal was to help them improve work so they could focus more on customers. Here's what they did. They got rid of over 300 policies and procedures. They were able to get rid of 100 forms that customers complained about, and they took 175 steps out of processes. At the end of that year, they had their highest customer service ratings ever. Free. So here's the thing with complexity, and then we're going to get into some tactics. The thing I want you to leave with complexity is, thinking about complexity is, most people get it wrong because they think of it too big. So what happens with complexity is when I ask people, why are things so complex? They'll say, well, for example, especially like a pharma or a bank, or when we work with defense companies, well, we're regulated. And yes, that's true. You are complex because you're regulated, but why can some people in the same industry as yours, with the same rules, have less complexity than you? Then they'll say, well, it's organizational, right? We're matrixed, all these things. Well, that's true. That is very complex. But when you ask people, what's the complexity that you spend all your time in, you know what they say? Tactical. Emails, meetings, policies, control. Those aren't in place by the CEO for the most part. And when you ask them why those things happen, you know what it is? Risk, fear, power, control, and trust. What happened during the pandemic was really interesting. When people went virtual, the reason so much work got questioned was because we had to. But the reason right now that it was hard for people was because when fear goes up, trust goes down. They're inversely related, right? Trust goes up, fear goes down. So if you can take the fear out, the trust will go up, and people can work virtually or they can work together. There's a lot of fear right now with bosses getting everyone back together that they don't trust people to work. If you take away the fear, the trust goes up. You want people to focus on their sphere of control. Stop telling me when I go to companies, well, we got to redo the IT system. We got to redo HR. Our travel policy is horrible. I'm sure it could be improved. But when you ask people what could they actually improve in their sphere of control, they come up with hundreds of ideas. Your daily sphere of control. So here's what I want to do. I want to teach you some things that you can do with your teams in your sphere of control, with meetings, with emails, with decisions, and then we're going to share some more between us. So let me dive in and talk about simplicity at work. Does anybody here actually have simplicity efforts or programs at their company? Anyone? Okay, you will now. Now you're gonna. All right, let's give you some things you can try. Let's start getting some time back from your teams. to do more valuable work. The first thing is, I think we need to flip the script on how we think about meetings. And we've taken inclusion a little too far. Now, I sit on inclusion boards, so I want us to think differently about inclusion. What I mean by that is we tend to not want to hurt people's feelings, so we include all the people in the meeting. Right? How many people actually plan a meeting, they say, who are all the people that need to be invited? Instead, think about what's the least number of people that need to be included because their time is too valuable to waste. NBC does this. Accenture does this. I do this. It is a badge of honor at my company and at NBC to be uninvited from a meeting because your time is too important. What happens in meetings at NBC is they treat them like a funnel. Think of it like a carpool where people can drop off during the meeting. And basically, they have people at the top of the meeting with the biggest part of the agenda, and then they allow people to be uninvited during different parts of the meeting if it's not worth their time. And the people that are left at the end of the meeting are either the ones running it or the other people feel like losers because they should have something else to do. So it is a badge of honor to spend less time in meetings unless it's absolutely necessary. Here's the next one. Think about getting people to think. And have your meetings, either in the subject line of the invite or the actual agenda, be questions. Questions hijack people's brains. Let me show you what I mean. On the count of 3, I want you to shout out the answer to this question. Are you ready? What's the color of the outside of your house? Okay? You immediately are able to tell me because I conjured up something in your head. Questions hijack the brain and they make us focus on problem solving. We are evolved to do that. So if you're going to ask a question in a subject line, you're going to get people to think about what you want them to talk about in the meeting before they come. The reason that's powerful is this. It stops you from doing the same old thing, an agenda that just has statements. Or if you have a subject line, people actually know why, if you ask a question, you want them to be there in the first place. It also forces the person sending the meeting to figure out why they want to have it in the first place. All right, here's the next one. Merck. I want you to do better emails. And let me give you 2 tricks that you're going to try right away. The first one is called NNTR. Has anyone heard of NNTR before? NNTR stands for no need to respond. And here's how it works. Merck that has a chief simplification officer. And he basically, he was in Canada, and he actually just retired a bit ago. And he said, we're getting all these empty calorie emails from people, right? Those emails that you send out that are FYIs, like, just wanted to share this article, and everyone feels the need to respond, right? He said, what we're going to do now for emails that are meant to be one way, we're going to type NNTR in the subject line, no need to respond. They cut down their email traffic internally by 13% in that group. The second thing, we practice this all the time, is bluff. Who knows what bluff is? Anyone in the military or served in the military here? No? Bluff stands for bottom line up front. And the reason this is really important is because everyone sending their email starts it with bluff, and you say exactly what you're asking the person for or what the email is about. Why does this matter? You spend an inordinate amount of time, more than you think, crafting your beautiful emails. I do. No one cares. I mean, I don't mean it like that, but we spend so much time just crafting the perfect email when really people want you to get to the point. If you use bluff, people sending the emails get to the point, and the people receiving them love to answer them because they know you value their time. All right, here's the next one. How many people at work would love to kill stupid rules? This is probably the best exercise we do worldwide. We've done this with over 10,000 people at Pfizer. And here's how it works. You get people in a room, and you ask them, if you could kill any 2 rules at work, what would they be and why? That's it. Now, the rules can't be, if they're government mandated, or you would go to jail if you got rid of them, those are red rules, they don't count. But everything else has to be in your sphere of control. So ask your team, in your sphere of control, the group you work with every day, the work you do every day, if you could get rid of 2 things, what would they be? And what is fascinating, see if I brought a picture of it, I didn't. Let me give you the example of Pfizer. We had 1,000 people in the room one time, and I asked their leaders to give me 2 rules. So 1,000 leaders, 2,000 rules that they wanted to kill. I mean, they gave them to me within less than a minute. They put them up on Post-its, we did it on the wall. Let's assume that half of those are redundant. That's still 1,000 rules. Within the hour, We asked everybody to categorize them, and they were things like, Albert, the CEO, got up on stage with me, and he's like, okay, you guys think your meetings are too long. Okay, you want agendas at meetings. Oh, you hate this monthly operating report. You said it's redundant with others. He looked at the crew, at the leadership group, and he said, how many of you would like to get rid of these rules? And everyone raised their hand. And the bombshell came when he said, what's stopping you? He said, why are you waiting for me to tell you you don't have to have 60-minute meetings? And it was like a real watershed moment, because he was saying, I'm expecting you to get rid of these problems, and you are empowered to do it. Killing stupid rules saved them probably in that day over $250,000, and that was in 1 hour. All right, here's the next one. I think your people are nervous to make decisions. They say they want to make decisions, but they're nervous to do it. And one of the things that Standard & Poor's did, I should say two of the things, is they did something called you, me, we. So what they did is they said to each person on their team, this is within risk, these are decisions, Joe, that you can make, that I can make, and that we can make. And so every decision, they knew exactly what the boundaries were. This is a you decision, a me decision, a we decision. And the other thing he did, the guy who headed up risk, he mandated people make decisions. He said to his team, he had a team of 10, and he said, I want you guys to make decisions without me. Oh, what do you mean? What decision? Just make some decisions without me. And the next time we have our status meeting in a month, I want you to come back and report to me 2 of the decisions you didn't make. I mean, you made without me. And it was hard for people. But the end of the month, they came back and everybody said 2 pretty lame decisions they made without him, like inviting someone to a meeting and didn't have to ask them. He said, great, now the next month, let's do 3 decisions without me. And then it was 4 decisions without. So suddenly it's 30 less decisions, 40 less decisions. And I said, well, how did you know it was working? How do you know they weren't just lame decisions? He said, I knew it was working when I started to become uncomfortable with how much more time I had on my hands. Because one of the things that happens with leaders is you don't realize how much you like to be busy. And being unbusy can make you uncomfortable. All right, the last thing, there's 2 more. One is practicing time boxing. How many of you time box at work? Good. That's good. The reason this is important is you think that you've got to just give your time away. Time is a non-renewable resource. You will never get it back. Right? You get so mad when people waste your money. Why don't you get mad when people waste your time? I don't understand. So, like, for example, when I do calls with clients, I say to my team, I only do these kickoff calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And they push back and they said, oh, that's not going to work. What about their calendars? I said, just say those are the only days I'm available. Guess what? Those are the only days I do kickoff calls, and they're much more well run because I'm in a groove, not in a rut. So how could you time box something? And here's the last one, and then we're going to do the exercise. How can you stop doing things? And this is a scary one for people, but Sanofi right now, we do this too in our strategic planning. We always ask people all the things they're going to do next year, like set your strategy for next year. Is anyone just done with their strategic planning? Anyone just wrap up their strategic planning? Yeah. Okay. Some people get it done in the fall, so I don't know. We just wrapped up ours. We wrap ours up in January. And we ask our team, so does Sanofi, tell me the things that you're going to commit to doing this year. And I also want you to tell me the things you're going to commit to stop doing this year. And the reason that is so powerful is because it forces people to say, what are the barriers that are in your way, and what are you going to commit to do? So later, next quarter when we check in, no one can say, well, these barriers are in there. Well, you committed, and I gave you permission to stop what's going on. Right? So stopping doing things is just as important. There are so many ways that we can simplify.
Real speakers, real coaches, real investors, real companies. No matter your destiny, all roads lead to Real Leaders Unite.